Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the January 8 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And I'm going to start on the front page, and under the byline of trade, the heading of this article is Carney Heads to China to Repair Relations. Prime Minister says work to be done on tariff dispute. And this is by Tonda McCharles. Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney heads to China next week on a complicated trade diversification mission before traveling to the Middle East and to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, to target more global investors. The trip is a high-stakes effort to rebuild Canada-China relations, which collapsed in 2018 during the first term of U.S. President Donald Trump, only to barely warm later to a deep chill amid allegations of Chinese foreign interference and unfair trade practices. The Prime Minister's office said Wednesday that Carney will depart January 13 and plans to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang, and other government and business leaders with the primary objective to elevate engagement on trade, energy, agriculture, and international security. The trip comes as Canadian agriculture producers grapple with Chinese counter tariffs on canola and canola oil, pork, and seafood exports that Beijing imposed after Ottawa matched American tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles and steel and aluminum. Carney's visit will be the first to China by a Canadian Prime Minister since Justin Trudeau traveled there in 2017. That was when the Liberals dreamed of free trade negotiations with China. A year later, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were detained after Canada cooperated with the U.S. in the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou during Trump's first presidential term, which was marked by his aggressive pushback against China on trade. It was only in 2021, after the U.S. struck a deal on the Huawei prosecution, that the two Michaels were released, that Canadian cabinet ministers began to lay the groundwork for re-engagement with China. Those efforts ramped up after Carney met Li on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in September, and with Xi at a summit of Asia-Pacific leaders in Korea on October 31, setting the New Year's trip in motion. Carney is also expected to swing through Qatar, a stopover the Prime Minister's office would not confirm, and then on to Davos for the annual two-day gathering of global business and government leaders. In an interview, security expert Wesley Wark said Carney's task is very complicated, but it's also, I would say, an opportune time, given the kind of actions that the Trump administration has taken in Venezuela, the threats to kind of expel Chinese investment from Venezuela and the Western Hemisphere, and general threats of annexation targeting Greenland. Carney's challenge, said Wark, is to show Beijing that Canada is not what the Chinese think it is, that we are not a satellite state of the United States. We're not a kind of puppet regime in the U.S., that we're formulating a new and independent approach to the world in light of concerns about the reliability of the U.S. as an ally, that we're looking to normalize relations with China and open up certain areas of cooperation, primarily in the economic sphere, alongside guardrails around certain kinds of engagements that might have security implications. Carney has already indicated Canada will limit engagement in the defense, military, technology, research, and development sectors. Wark said it's important to be clear with the Chinese on those points, but we still can work with China. Wark predicted Carney will want to have some kind of concrete outcome to show for the visit, in part to set aside the emptiness of the last Trudeau visit in 2017. A senior government official speaking on condition they not be identified in order to discuss details of the trip tempered expectations of an end to the current Canada-China tariff dispute. The insider casts the trip as primarily geared to restarting and rekindling a relationship. We've been working to reopen those channels, but it's still a work in progress, and there's still some work to be done, said the official. Given the way Trump has approached international trade, every country is pivoting right now, and for Canada to pivot and look for new partners, we must look at the world's largest economy, China, and have those conversations, the official said. Carney's trip to Davos, which he last attended in 2024, when he was the UN's climate finance envoy, is part of his effort to draw global capital to Canada, the official said. Canadian auto producers argue Canada should not drop punitive duties on Chinese electric vehicles, saying cheaply made subsidized Chinese EVs could swamp the market here. But several provinces, including Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador, say Chinese counter tariffs are cutting deep into their economies. In a written statement, Carney said at a time of global trade disruption, he aims to forge new partnerships around the world to transform our economy from one that has been reliant on a single trade partner to one that is stronger and more resilient to global shocks. We're creating new partnerships in energy and trade, attracting massive new investment and securing more opportunities for Canadians. The Canadian official said human rights could be part of discussions Carney has, but it was clear any concerns about Chinese foreign interference, transnational repression, restrictions on liberties in Xinjiang province, Hong Kong, or aggressions in around Taiwan are not on the formal agenda that was still to be crafted. Political scientist and Chinese expert Lynette Ong of University of Toronto and the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy said in an interview that concerns about China's record on human rights are very valid, but I think they should be disentangled with trade engagement. Whether Canada builds a closer economic partnership with China will not likely alter China's actions, and Canada must enact measures to insulate ourselves from those harms, she said, while advancing Canadian interests. We need to think about playing our cards very differently, throw away our fundamental assumptions because we live in a brand new world, said Ong. And we need to figure out how to engage with China and maximize our interests. At the same time, it will not be easy, but this is a game that we need to learn to play. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe posted a statement on X saying it is good to see the Prime Minister is going to China and that he hoped to see progress on advancing market access for canola and other Canadian products. If we are truly serious about securing, diversifying, and expanding Canadian markets around the world, this is a country we should engage with in a serious way. And the next article from the front page is titled The Recycling Blues. Ford's new system suffers growing pains beyond bin collection failures. And this is by David Ryder. The Ford government's new industry-run recycling system is suffering growing pains beyond the many blue bins languishing uncollected since last week. Key players are pointing fingers at each other for the ongoing collection failure in pockets of Toronto and giving the public conflicting, sometimes inaccurate, information. The problems, serious enough to prompt a warning this week from Premier Doug Ford that he'll intervene if necessary, now have a city official demanding that Circular Materials take residents' recycling queries around the clock, as the city previously did, and CUPE Local 416 urging Ford to let Toronto revert to city-run recycling. Circular Materials, a national nonprofit funded by McDonald's, Costco, and other businesses responsible for packaging, is in charge of running recycling in Ontario and hired Green for Life Environmental to collect curbside recycling across Toronto. Councillor Paula Fletcher, chair of the city's Infrastructure and Environment Committee, told the Star on Wednesday, last fall, the head of Circular Materials came to our committee and said the new systems rollout would be great, and that's not what we're seeing at all. Instead, we're in a Franz Kafka novel where they're all pointing the finger of blame at one another. Nobody's answering the phone when residents call to complain, and homeowners are getting very frustrated, Fletcher said. People used to get terrific recycling service from the City of Toronto. At the very least, Circular Materials should have a 24-hour response line like the city's 311 service. January 1 marked the end of a phase-in period for so-called extended producer responsibility, fully making recycling systems formerly run by municipalities the responsibility of companies that produce the waste, a switch Premier Doug Ford said would save cities and towns millions of dollars and, thanks to an expanded list of materials accepted in blue bins, divert more waste from landfill. A rocky run-up in 2025, including regulation changes in response to industry complaints, continued into the new year. Swaths of Toronto, where residents were told to put out their bins for a special holiday collection last Friday or Saturday, saw no trucks arrive from GFL. Despite Circular Materials' apologies and assurances that GFL has made progress on the missed homes, some homeowners told the Star on Wednesday their boxes remain at the curb. Patty Cross, who lives on Ellens Avenue near Jane Street and St. Clair Avenue West, said bins that have sat in front of her and her neighbors' homes since last Saturday made it difficult to navigate the sidewalks with the recycling, the extra bags of recycling, and the snow and ice accumulation. She's hoping that GFL trucks at least pick it up on Friday, their next scheduled collection. Bins remained uncollected Wednesday on Gil Hardy's side of Hillsdale Avenue East in the Mount Pleasant, Eglinton East area. Hardy and his neighbors put their bins out last Thursday for Friday pickup. It appears there's an area roughly between Mount Pleasant Road and Bayview Avenue and North Hillsdale and Eglinton East, which has still not been completely served by GFL, he said. An aide to Councilor Rachel Chernos Lynn, Ward 15, Don Valley West, said many of the ward's residents were still awaiting collection. Ted Avalis, Executive Vice President of CUP Local 416, is renewing a call for the Ford government to exempt Toronto from privatized recycling. Last autumn, he predicted Circular Materials would struggle to provide the same service that city workers provided east of Yonge Street, and that was contracted out to GFL west of Yonge, but overseen by city officials. It's obviously not going well. So we should go back to the table and have that discussion, he said. Neither Circular Materials or GFL have publicly explained why so many homes were missed. Circular Materials Chief Executive Alan Langdon would only say that he had told GFL to fix the problem as soon as possible. But a reader told the Star that a GFL customer support agent blamed Circular Materials for the problem, saying it did not give GFL sufficient notice of the special holiday collections. Circular Materials agreed with city officials late last year to continue the tradition of an extra pickup to deal with wrapping, boxes, and other holiday waste. The Star called the helpline and got the same information. Essentially, the GFL fleet wasn't prepared to go out that day, an agent said, because notice of the special collections was extremely late to actually have a positive effect. So we're doing our best to clean that up. In a statement Wednesday, Langdon disputed that characterization. We have confirmed with GFL that the statement regarding notice of the special pickup requirement is not reflective of the approved messaging being used by GFL staff nor the training received by their customer service staff, Langdon said. He added Circular Materials has a strong and collaborative working relationship with our service provider, GFL Environmental, and they are working around the clock with GFL to ensure any missed residential pickup is addressed and will be collected by the end of this week. Langdon did not, however, address another problem identified by readers and confirmed by the Star. The Circular Materials app, which allows users to plug in their address and learn which day they get collection, was on Wednesday providing the wrong recycling day for many parts of Toronto. For example, while the city and Circular Materials websites tell Hardy that his recycling will be collected every other Thursday, the app said his recycling day is Tuesday. The app also gave incorrect collection days for addresses in Riverside, Central Etobicoke, and the Highway 401 and Leslie Street neighborhood of North York. The GFL customer service agent told the Star that the app is, quote, buggy, unquote, and should be giving correct collection dates by the end of this week. And I need to pause here for a moment to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is from the front page under the byline of crime. He was there to kill somebody. Police believe U of T student randomly targeted in shooting. And this is by James Bullinoff and Josh McGinnis. A man who shot and killed a 20-year-old student on a trail on the University of Toronto Scarborough campus last month randomly targeted his victim and was on the school grounds that day, quote, to kill someone, unquote, police said. Why or how he chose the victim is not clear, police told reporters in an update on Wednesday. On December 23, just after 3:30 p.m., police responded to the area of Highland Creek Trail and Old Kingston Road after reports of a shooting. When officers arrived, they located Shivank Avashni, suffering from gunshot wounds on a popular walking trail used by students, staff, and members of the community referred to as the Valley, according to police. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Police said the suspect fled the area before officers arrived. On Wednesday, police said they have charged Babatund Afuap, 28, with first-degree murder. Afuap was on parole for firearm offenses at the time of the shooting, Toronto Police Detective Sergeant Stacy McCabe said at a press conference. He was arrested for a parole violation on December 28, she added. McCabe said police do not believe the accused and the victim were known to each other, and they're still investigating a motive. We found no connection between these two. We believe he was there to kill somebody. How he chose that person, I don't know, she said. He was looking to target someone, she added. Police wouldn't say how they came to that belief, adding they're leaving it to the courts. In addition to the first-degree murder charge, Afuap is also facing a number of weapons-related charges, according to court documents. On December 28, he was charged with a number of offenses related to possessing a prohibited firearm, specifically a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun, as well as 7 bullets. Police have released a photo of the accused and are appealing to the public for more information, adding that they believe more people may have seen the suspect on the trail where the shooting happened or at campus. Multiple witnesses called police after the incident, including reports of gunshots, according to McCabe. We recognize that this incident caused a great deal of fear and concern for our students, staff, and members of the community, particularly those that use this trail, said McCabe. We do want to reassure the community that the person responsible is in custody. Avasi was an active member of the U of T Scarborough campus's cheerleading team and powerlifting group. This is a deeply tragic case. Shivank was a third-year university student from India. He was young, bright, and had his whole life ahead of him, she added. Our thoughts remain with his family, friends, classmates, and everyone affected by his loss. We are personally heartbroken and know many of you may be feeling a range of emotions in the wake of this senseless violence. U of T President Melanie Wooden and UTSC Principal Linda Johnston said in a memo to students Wednesday, adding that campus security was increasing patrols on campus and in the Highland Creek Valley. And I have one last article that starts on the front page that is under the byline of City Hall. Property taxes to increase by 2.2%. Chow to unveil hike in wake of operating shortfall. And this is by Modis Habibinia and Ben Spur. Mayor Olivia Chow has revealed Toronto homeowners will face a 2.2% property tax increase this year, a modest pre-election hike that comes even as the city confronts a $1 billion shortfall and rising costs across major services. Chow says the increase, which is far lower than hikes in the past 2 years and less than what many insiders had expected, is intended to keep life affordable. But it has already prompted accusations of creative accounting from some councilors who say key details of how budget will be balanced remain unclear. Although the city wasn't set to officially launch the annual spending plan until Thursday, a statement from the mayor's office on Wednesday said it will include a 0.7% hike to the residential property tax rate, plus a previously approved 1.5% annual increase for the city building fund to pay for transit and housing infrastructure. The city was facing an estimated $1 billion operating shortfall heading into 2026, as well as lower revenues from real estate taxes, transit fares, development charges, and the outlawed speed camera program. The budgets of the TTC and Toronto Police already more than $12 billion, are set to grow by 7%. The city's overall operating budget is expected to be about $19 billion this year. The full picture of how Chow's administration has been able to address those pressures while limiting property tax revenue won't be clear until the budget is released Thursday. Councilor Shelley Carroll, Don Valley North, who is also the city's budget chief, told the Star that while developing the budget, the rate shifted up and down, but keeping it at an affordable number was always the goal. It just ended up landing right on the nose of the current inflation rate, she said. We're not cutting services to get here, Carroll said. This budget is about being responsible with public dollars while protecting the services people rely on every day. City Hall insiders will be watching to see whether she has resorted to unsustainable strategies, such as raiding reserve funds. Councilor Lily Chang from Willowdale, who's also a Budget Committee member, said she thinks most residents will definitely be relieved by the tax rate, but said there is some concern for sure about the accounting to reach an unexpectedly low number. I have no doubt that hard decisions had to have been made, Chang said, but I will be fine-tooth combing through the spreadsheets because it is quite an achievement. I hope I'm not losing something significant. In Chow's statement, she said the budget is meant to make life more affordable for Toronto families. I hear from Torontonians every day about the stress they feel trying to keep up with the rising cost of living, Chow said, noting the budget would freeze TTC fares for the third straight year, keep libraries open 7 days a week, and fund school nutrition programs. It will also include a higher tax rate on the sale of luxury homes, worth more than $3 million, that the mayor says will ensure wealthier buyers pay their fair share. Taking office after the 2023 mayoral by-election, Chow hit homeowners with a record 9.5% increase in 2024 and 6.9% last year. She argued the hikes were necessary to address the financial mess she inherited from her predecessors. Chow is introducing the new lower rate in an election year, although she has yet to confirm she will run in the October contest. The softer increase could serve as a shield against political opponents who depict her as a tax and spend progressive whose previous budgets have made life in the city less affordable. John Tory, who is mulling another run at the helm of City Hall, proposed a tax increase of 4.4% and 7% in his final 2 years as mayor before resigning in 2023. Obviously for Chow, and to be fair, probably for councilors as well, there's a political consideration in keeping taxes low, Chang said. Councilor Brad Bradford, Beaches, East York, has previously criticized Chow for raising taxes, but gave her no credit Wednesday for supporting a lower rate. The councilor, who has already announced his plan to run for the mayor's job this fall, accused Chow's office of withholding potentially damaging details of the budget until after it had released the low property tax number. He predicted the mayor will have to rely on reserve funds to balance the budget and accused her of mortgaging Toronto's future for her re-election bid. Reserve funds are meant to be for a rainy day, not for a re-election campaign, he said, asserting that if she is re-elected, Torontonians will be on the hook for an even bigger bill next year. Chow has previously said city divisions would be asked to consolidate increases from previous years and council wouldn't be able to grant everything departments are asking for. in 2026. Across other GTA municipalities, tax hikes this year range from 3.36% to 5.8%. And I need to pause once more to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, the next article is under the byline of federal politics. Freeland will step down on Friday. Liberal-leaning riding expected to be hotly contested unless Carney just appoints a candidate. This is by Ryan Tumilty and Robert Benzie. Ottawa. With the Liberals inching closer to a majority, Chrystia Freeland's Toronto seat will be a coveted prize, with several potential candidates already expressing interest. Freeland said Wednesday that Friday would be her last day as MP for University Rosedale. Her departure will trigger a by-election, which Prime Minister Mark Carney must call within 180 days of her stepping down. The riding has been a strong Liberal stronghold, and Freeland won the seat with 64% of the vote in last year's election. Speaking in Paris on Tuesday, Carney said Freeland served the country admirably, and his party will have good candidates in University Rosedale and any other by-elections. We will have a by-election. There will be a few by-elections coming up, and we will run great candidates, and the people in those ridings will decide who they want to send to Parliament. Carney didn't indicate when he would call the by-election, but a spokesperson for the Liberal Party said the process would start soon. The nomination process in the riding will move forward in accordance with all of the party's nomination rules in due course, Matteo Rossi said in an email. Those rules allow Carney as leader to bypass the nomination process entirely and appoint a candidate at any point in the process. However, several people have already expressed interest in running for the Liberals. Toronto physician Dr. Danielle Martin, chair of the University of Toronto's Family Medicine program, said she is seriously considering a run. In 2019, Martin's defense of Canadian healthcare in front of a U.S. Senate committee went viral, and she has supported U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders' legislation that would bring universal health care to all Americans. Another possible candidate is John Tory Jr., son of the former Toronto mayor. Last year, Tory expressed an interest in running for the Liberals. On Wednesday, he said it was too early to declare his intentions, but he is eager to be a part of the Liberal team. I'm a big supporter of and believer in Prime Minister Carney and would welcome the opportunity to run under the Liberal banner, he said. University Rosedale could be the first of several by-elections. Scarborough Southwest Liberal MP Bill Blair is rumored to be under consideration for a diplomatic appointment in London, and Edmonton Conservative MP Matt Genereux announced his intention to step down this spring. At Queen's Park, where the provincial Liberals are gearing up for a leadership contest this year, there is speculation about the impact of the 2 Toronto federal seats becoming available. One Ontario Liberal insider, speaking confidentially in order to discuss internal deliberations, said the jockeying to be a candidate in the ridings is dominating discussions in the party. There is a knock-on effect, said the insider, noting potential provincial Liberal leadership candidates could be drawn to the federal by-elections. With the next Ontario election not expected for at least 2 years, and Premier Doug Ford's 3-term Progressive Conservatives still leading in public opinion polls, running for Carney's Liberals could be a more attractive option for ambitious candidates, the source said. Carney is a surer bet, said the insider. Any by-election puts the spotlight on the Liberals, who are one seat away from a majority in the House of Commons after the defections of former Conservative MPs Chris d'Entremont and Michael Mah to the Liberals late last year. Carney's team continues to look for more opposition MPs to join the Liberals. NDP MP Lori Idleout told CBC she had been asked to consider crossing the floor but has ruled it out at this point. Conservative MP Scott Anderson said he was approached, but it would be a, quote, cold day in hell, unquote, before he would join the Liberals. Other names Liberals sources indicate could be candidates for Freeland's seat include Dr. Andrew Boozary, Executive Director of the Gattuso Center for Social Medicine at the University Health Network, Andrea Barrack, a senior executive at RBC who was the provincial Liberal candidate in the riding in 2022, and Pamela Jeffrey, who ran for the provincial Liberals last year and is founder of the Prosperity Project, a nonprofit that aims to remove systemic barriers to women participating in the economy. The Star was not able to reach Boozary, Barrack, or Jeffrey on Wednesday. And the next article is under the byline of Queen's Park. New power line will run under Lake Ontario. Province okays link from Darlington plant to Port Lands by Rob Ferguson. Ontario is going underwater to get more electricity into Toronto, saying it's the cheapest and least disruptive option to meet fast-growing needs. The province has approved a $1.5 billion submarine transmission line in Lake Ontario to get power from the Darlington nuclear power plant westward into the Port Lands instead of going overland with a series of towers. This is the safest and lowest cost, best way to build capacity for tomorrow, Energy Minister Stephen Lecce said Wednesday, noting the cable will be safer in extreme weather such as floods and ice storms. It will become a third transmission line feeding Canada's largest city. The project will be subject to an environmental assessment and will go out for competitive bids in a process expected to take 7 to 10 years. The 900 megawatt line, enough to power the equivalent of 900,000 homes, should begin operating by 2037, Lecce said. The two existing lines are slated to reach capacity in the early 2030s as demand for electricity continues to grow thanks to vehicle electrification, the new Ontario Line subway, and a larger population. Demand is expected to double by 2050. Officials said the submarine cable will stretch 65 kilometers, with an exact route to be determined following studies of the lake bed. The sheathed cable, similar to ones in operation around the world, including several Atlantic provinces, is expected to have the diameter of a large dinner plate, officials told in a technical briefing. New Democrat MPP Jamie West of Sudbury said it will be important to keep a close watch on the planning process. The need for additional electricity capacity in Toronto is clear, but major questions remain about cost certainty, timelines, and long-term impacts on ratepayers, he added in a statement to the Star. Decisions of this scale must be guided by evidence-based planning and strong public oversight. Lecce said the line could pave the way to the eventual decommissioning of the Portland's natural gas-fired power plant, a major source of carbon emissions. With Premier Doug Ford's government building 4 small modular nuclear reactors at the Darlington site, the new line would be poised to carry electricity from them. The province is also considering a massive new nuclear plant just east of Darlington in Port Hope, although that would not be in operation until the 2040s. And the next article is under the byline of Toronto Budget Debates. TTC's financial future is, quote, terrifying. Without more provincial funding, the transit agency predicts a $379 million shortfall next year. And this is by Andy Takagi. The TTC is asking City Council for $93 million more to fund its spending plan for 2026. But its board was warned Wednesday that even with that increase, it still faces a multi-million-dollar financial hole it can't fill in 2027. During its debate over the TTC's $3.03 billion operating budget for 2026, the board was told by staff that there would be a $379 million shortfall next year because of expected ridership demands, increasing costs of providing service, and the new fare capping system if there's no additional funding from the province. In order to fill that looming gap, the TTC would need to increase fares by more than 50%, according to staff. If we had to generate the $379 million, we would have to do a fare increase of about $1.90 to fill the hole, warned John Montagnies, the TTC's interim chief financial officer. The 2026 budget, approved unanimously by the board on Wednesday, contains funding for high-profile, rider-focused promises made by Mayor Olivia Chow. Those include bringing Line 1 and Line 2 service back to pre-pandemic levels to help boost rush hour service, another year of frozen fares, and the introduction of fare capping, which replaces the monthly pass system. Although Chow has not officially announced whether she will run for re-election in October, TTC board member Councillor Diane Sachs said she considered this an election budget. It's wonderful to be able to knock on doors in an election year with service increases, no fare increase and fare capping. Sachs said, "This is a good news budget for this year, but next year is terrifying." Other board members expressed similar concerns about the TTC's financial state. "I'm not convinced yet that some or all of these chickens aren't going to come home to roost," said Julia Osborne, a citizen member of the TTC board. "Right now, the plan seems to be to cross fingers and hope that the province renews its support." Ridership was significantly below projections last year, which the TTC blamed on lower international student enrollment and poor economic conditions. Because of that lower ridership, the transit agency had to pull $35 million out of its reserve fund. Board Chair Jamal Myers acknowledged that the TTC is in a more precarious financial position after depleting its rainy day fund, but he referred any questions about more funding for the TTC from a renewed provincial municipal New Deal to Premier Doug Ford and Mayor Chow's offices. The original New Deal in 2023 uploaded municipal highways, to Ontario and provided the city with up to $9 billion in provincial funding relief. Because of the original New Deal, we were able to open the Finch West LRT and will have the money to operate the Eglinton Crosstown, said Myers. There was a lot of important money to help us improve security and just get transit back on track. After last year's disappointing ridership growth, the TTC is planning for moderate growth this year, Myers added, with the agency hoping to encourage riders back onto the system with an aggressive ridership growth strategy. We're going through some challenging times, unpredictability in terms of the global economy. So there's a lot of imbalance in the world right now, said the TTC's new CEO, Mandeep Lally, who took over the city's transit agency in July. The proposed 6.8% increase for the 2026 budget follows last year's bump of 6.5% and comes at a time when the TTC has struggled to bring back riders since the pandemic, despite return-to-office mandates that kicked in for many workers last fall. The TTC has struggled with delivering consistent on-time service to riders, many of whom have become increasingly frustrated. Slow zones, parts of the tracks where trains come to a crawl, persist across the system, in part due to the TTC's growing state of good repair backlog. And the Finch West LRT, the city's first new transit line in more than 2 decades, built by Metrolinx and operated by the TTC, has struggled to operate at promised speeds and in poor weather conditions. Those problems loom over the agency as it prepares to ferry the flurry of attendees expected for the FIFA World Cup in June without provincial or federal operating funds. The amount of red ink that runs through the entire TTC budget is absolutely terrifying, said Sachs. I'm really worried about next year. And I need to pause one more time to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is under the byline of supervised drug consumption. Study finds sites don't affect crime rate. McGill University researchers tracked incidents of assault, break-and-enter, robbery since 2014. And this is by Omar Masla. Supervised consumption sites in Toronto are controversial and often painted as beacons for crime. But that's not borne out by the evidence, according to a recent study out of McGill University. The study reports supervised consumption sites in Toronto have not led to a sustained increase in crime in the areas where they reside. In fact, in most cases, crime rates remain stable or even declined in the neighborhoods they opened. The study, published in JAMA Network Open in November, used Toronto Police Service data from 2014 to 2025 to track 5 crimes that influence how safe people feel in their neighborhood. That's assault, auto theft, break-and-enter, robbery, and theft over $5,000, as well as bicycle theft and theft from vehicles within 400 meters of 9 supervised consumption sites in Toronto before and after they opened. To our knowledge, this was the first study to examine the association of multiple supervised consumption sites implemented across a large metropolitan area for a variety of crimes, the study said. Robberies, thefts over $5,000, bicycle thefts, and thefts from motor vehicles saw a downward trend after the sites opened. There were some caveats. Researchers found there were spikes in break and enters and auto thefts in some areas immediately after the sites opened, but over time those numbers diminished. The study examined incidences of crimes after the sites opened and also the rates over the following 3 years. Break and enters saw the largest spikes immediately after implementation. Overall, 9 sites break and enters increased 50% after the site opened, but decreased by around 1% each month afterward. Overall, we did not find the crime consistently increased immediately after implementation, and in most cases there were downward trends, said Dimitra Panagiotoglu, an associate professor in McGill's Department of Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Occupational Health, and co-author of the study. Supervised consumption sites became a lightning rod for controversy after Carolina Hubner McCurrat was shot and killed on July 7, 2023, outside the South Riverdale Community Health Center, which had a consumption site. Akwasi Owusu Bempah, an associate professor at the University of Toronto and drug policy expert, was involved in a separate study that reported that the implementation of supervised consumption sites was not linked to higher homicide rates in those areas. Together, these studies challenge the narrative that harm reduction undermines public safety and suggests that policy decisions should be guided by evidence rather than fear, he said. The authors propose several possible explanations for why crimes declined. One is the honeypot effect. A new service could attract people who may engage in crimes of opportunity, causing an immediate spike. However, they said that can't explain why the associated level of change did not persist. Increased police presence around the operating sites could also have played a role. The authors acknowledge they did not take into account issues of open drug use, vandalism, unruly behavior, and general social disorder, which are often highly visible and can make people feel unsafe. Some areas with sites did see increases in crime upon opening, namely break and enters in Kensington Market and auto thefts in Moss Park. Panagiotoglu suggested that this could be because of environmental factors, with Kensington Market's bustling shops providing opportunities for break-ins, while Moss Park is located near 4 parking garages, creating opportunities for vehicle-related thefts. Results varied dramatically by site, noted Mohammed Karamouzian, an infectious disease epidemiologist and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, who was a co-author in the study with Owusu Bempah. At Kensington Market, break and enters nearly tripled, up 177%. At Moss Park, break and enters roughly doubled, up 92%, while vehicle-related thefts also increased. In Parkdale and Kensington Market, assaults decreased 28%. However, the initial spikes did not persist. The declining monthly trends suggest that whatever spike occurred at implementation was transient, Karamouzian said. Over time, the effect appears to reverse. He said when the researchers restricted the analysis to just 24 months before and after implementation, the association with break-and-enters essentially disappeared. This is important and suggests the findings may be driven by long-term trends unrelated to the sites themselves. Crime may have already been escalating in these areas before the sites opened, Karamouzian said. He added that locations for supervised consumption sites weren't selected randomly, but placed in high-need areas that were already experiencing elevated drug use, homelessness, and social vulnerability. If supervised consumption sites inherently caused crime, we would expect consistent effects across all 9 sites, and we don't see that. Okay, I'll try and fit in one more short article. Man faces multiple charges by Josh McGinnis. A Toronto man is facing a string of charges, including attempted murder, arson, and insulting a peace officer, following a series of incidents Sunday in the West End. Officers were called to Bloor Street West and Bathurst Street area just before 1 p.m. for a reported fire, and to nearby College Street for a stabbing, police said in a news release. Investigators allege a 32-year-old man set a fire inside a residence before going to a second location where he became involved in an altercation with a woman. The woman was repeatedly assaulted with an edged weapon, police said. A second person intervened and was also assaulted. The woman was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries, according to the paramedics. Police say the suspect fled the area and was later located near Lakeshore Boulevard and Remembrance Drive, where he jumped into Lake Ontario. Marine unit officers were deployed to rescue the man. While pulling him from the water, officers struggled to disarm the suspect, and one officer suffered knife wounds to their hands, police said. The injured officer was treated at the scene by firefighters and later taken to hospital with minor injuries, the Toronto Police Association said in a post on X. All of the officers involved will be going home to their families, the association said, praising their acts of bravery. The man has been charged with attempted murder, assault with a weapon, arson with disregard for human life, and 3 counts of failing to comply with probation. And I will end now with you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 8 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.